Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining today's CA Plex CA2E Community Webcast. Today we're joined by Roger Griffith from Eagle Sun Systems. Before I hand things off to Roger, just a quick reminder that if you have any questions along the way, please enter them in the Q&A feature right within the WebEx. If you don't see the Q&A box in the lower right of your screen, all you need to do is click on the question mark icon in the upper right, and it will open up for you. Roger and I talked beforehand, and we're going to handle all the questions at the end of his presentation. And with that, Roger, I hand off to you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say good morning to all my friends out there in the Plex community. I want to thank you for taking the time to join this. I think it's going to be a great webcast, and I think everyone's going to pick up some tips and learn some new things and hopefully see some ideas on how you can build better applications from Plex and deliver a richer user experience to your users. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a tour of the 3 different control options that are available to you in Plex. And I know you're thinking up till now you've only had 2, but you've actually had 3. And basically I've got some graphics there in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see representing the Winwidget is a normally aspirated AMC pacer. In the middle, you've got the supercharged AMC pacer representing the MFC control, and on the right, representing the Windows controls, is the Ferrari. Now, when I say the Windows controls, it says Windows 7. What I'm really referring to is Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, just the whole thing, because really what you'll be doing when you implement the techniques that I'm going to show you in the slides following this is you're really embedding native Windows controls in your applications. So your applications will have the look and feel of modern Windows applications. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If you can't, please turn up your speakers. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Roger Griffith. I work for Eagle Sun Systems Products in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I consider myself to be the world's leading CA Plex evangelist. I'm an advocate of Plex. I love the tool. I've been using it for a long time. That is a very recent picture of me, in case you were wondering. I am a Boise State Bronco fan. So in the beginning, kind of my background, I started with the Sign-On 2E product back in 1989 and developed green screen applications for the IBM AS400. And then when Plex came out around 1996, back then, of course, it was called Obsidian. Then I migrated from the 2E tool into the Obsidian tool. I came on about Obsidian version 2.0 and have been developing enterprise applications with Plex ever since. A little bit about my platform experience on the client side. I have delivered enterprise applications using C++, C#, and Java. Most of the application experience that I have is in using the WinC generator to generate C++, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So everything I'm going to show you today really applies to the C++ client. On the server side, my experience is both with C++, C#, .NET, Java, and then RPG LE for the IBM I environment. So I've used, pretty much every generator that's available to us in Plex. So let's take a little trip in time here and look at the history of the controls that we have to choose from. As I mentioned, when Obsidian was first introduced, we had one option, and that was the Winwidget control. That was around 1996. And the Winwidget control, it works, but it looks and it feels outdated in 2016. It just looks old. But one of the positive things for the Winwidget controls is those controls have, in my opinion, the fewest issues that you have to kind of work around in order to make them work the way you want to work in your applications. So then around 2002, plus or minus, when the product was called Plex. Then they introduced the MFC control. The MFC control was slightly more modern than the Winwidget controls. That is a Microsoft control. And but it still has some issues, and you have to work around these issues. And the way it's always been done in the past is in the INI file that you deploy with your EXE, there's a section where you can go in by control and you can specify whether or not you want to implement the Winwidget control or the MFC control. And my experience has always been that most people have used the Winwidget controls because of the fact that they have the fewest issues. It's kind of the lesser of two evils, I guess. But the reality of it is that we have the ability to use native Windows controls. These controls that are on your user interfaces, they are the same controls. They look and feel exactly the same as the controls that are on other Windows applications that you're running on your PC. In my opinion, they're just native. And the way you turn those on is with a linker setting that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And then you really do need to add some C++ source code into your standards layer in order to make the controls work properly. And what's interesting is that these controls have been available to us for many years. We just didn't know about it. My friend George Jeffcock published an article out on the wiki that introduced how to do this, and he's got the source code, the linker settings, the works, and we found out about that, I'm going to say about 8 or 9 months ago, and immediately started working with it and kind of sorting out some of the issues that we run across. These are the same issues that you will run across, and hopefully I'm going to be showing you the solutions to these issues later. But I do want to thank George for being the pioneer of this technology that I'm about to show you, because I really do think that it's something that gives your Plex applications a tremendous boost. It just modernizes them overnight. It's amazing how quick you get benefit for the little amount of effort that you have to put into it to implement this. So I mentioned that you have choices, and your choices are based on settings that are in your INI file as to whether or not your application is going to use the Winwidget control set or the MFC control set. So there's the section in your INI file. The default for all of the controls, list box, spin button, et cetera, is 1, which is the MFC control. And if you decide that you want to use Winwidget, then you change them to 0. And you can mix and match, and a lot of people do. They like, for one particular control, they may prefer MFC, and for other controls, they prefer Winwidget. So you're in control as to which flavor of controls that you want based on these settings. Now, as I mentioned, there's the ability to use the Windows controls, and the way you turn on those Windows controls is by taking that linker setting that's in the bottom left-hand corner and pasting it into your linker options in your gen build options. So basically, you paste that into your gen build options linker settings, save it, and then recreate your executable. And that's really the only thing that needs to be created. You do not have to regen and build the entire application. To immediately get the controls, all you really have to do is just apply the linker setting and recreate your EXE. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about choosing between Winwidget or MFC. As I mentioned, that each set of controls, they have their own issues that you have to work around. And what most users tend to do is they tend to pick the control that has the fewest issues. Little glitches, things that don't necessarily work the way a user would expect them to. And for the most part, I would say that Winwidget has the fewest number of issues. I think that it's probably something that, some people would look at it and they would say it's not really an issue, that's just the way the control works and it's okay, but other people would consider them issues. Excuse me. So regardless of which flavor you use, Winwidget or MSC, the reality of it is that your Plex panels will look outdated by using either of these two flavors of the controls. They really have the look and feel of an application that was developed back in the 90s. And the reality is that we thought that we had to just live with this. We thought, well, that's just the way it's going to be, and really our only option to do anything about it to deliver a more modern user interface would be to migrate our applications to the new .NET client. And as you probably know, if you do that, the .NET client, it introduces a whole new set of challenges. It's going to be a time-consuming effort. It's going to take a significant amount of manpower to go through and do it right. You're not going to have your applications migrated over to .NET in a short time frame. It's going to take a matter of time and effort. And there's got to be a solution out there that allows us to deliver a more modern user interface that you can implement now. And the good news is there is, and we're going to look at it in just a minute. So get ready to get excited, my friends, because with these new Windows controls, you now have the ability to deliver a very modern, rich, and robust user interface to your applications without a lot of effort. So this is just kind of a prototype panel that I threw together, and it really kind of illustrates the difference in what these controls look like as compared to the controls that you have right now in your Plex applications. The one that I think you get the biggest benefit from is buttons. Before, a button was just this nasty gray square that just kind of sat on your user interface. It didn't have any depth to it. It didn't have any, it didn't change color or anything like that. It wasn't real interactive as you highlighted over it, moved your mouse over it, et cetera, et cetera. But with the Windows controls, the buttons specifically are much sexier. They have kind of a two-tone to them. So the bottom half of the button is kind of a darker gray. The top half of the button is a lighter shade of gray, so it gives it some depth. The buttons are more interactive in terms of as you move your mouse over the top of a button, the button changes color, kind of in a very gradual, soft way it changes its color. They're just much better all the way around. Other controls, they just have a crisper user interface. So I think that you're going to like them a lot. So the reality is with these new controls, you're able to take your Plex applications and make them look 10 to 15 years newer with very little effort involved. Your applications will look much better than this. This is just kind of a quick and dirty kind of a mock-up of what you can do with the new controls. So yes, you can look and feel younger for free. Everything I'm showing you here is at zero cost to you. It's just settings, configuration, some source code, and gen and build. Okay, so by simply entering in a linker setting, that the detail of that is out on the wiki, which I'm going to refer to at the end of this presentation. You can just go out there to the wiki, copy and paste it into your gen and build options. You will need to add some C++ source code to your application in your standards layer for any buttons that include a graphic. And you will also need to do some tweaking to your applications to get the look and feel you want. So you're going to want to go into your standards layer and do some slight changes to the settings to get the optimal result that you want. And in the end, what you're going to have is an application that looks 15 years younger and is very modern. So let's talk a little bit about, some of the issues that we have today with the Winwidget controls and the MSC controls, and I'll also talk about some of the issues that you'll run across with the Windows controls. So what's wrong with the Winwidget? So there's really one big issue with the Winwidget control that I'm sure you already know about if you're using those controls. And that is, if you're running your application and the user has multiple monitors, and your application happens to be running on a secondary monitor, so it's not the primary monitor, a user will prompt on a drop-down combo box control, and what happens is the drop-down list of values does not appear directly below the combo control on that user interface. The drop-down list of values appears over on your primary monitor. It's the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen, but that's what it does. So you basically have two options on how to deal with this particular issue. You can either tell your users to make sure that they're always running your Plex applications on the primary monitor, which is not a good option. They won't like that, and they probably won't even do it. Or your second option is to just tell them to get used to it. So, you know, once they've seen it a few times where they're running your application on a secondary monitor, they prompt, they don't see the list of values, they look around like, where the heck is my list of values? And then they look over on their primary monitor, and there it is. A lot of people will just say, okay, that's just Plex, so I'll just go over there and pick from the values over on my primary monitor. Not a good option. So there it is. So you're running your application on a secondary monitor. You've got a drop-down combo box there for the widget status. The user clicks on the little down arrow to bring it down, and the values appears over on your primary monitor over on the right. Nasty. So now let's look at what's wrong with the MFC controls. The big one, in my opinion, that I think is very kind of nasty is that whenever a field is in a state of protected, which it will be for like your keys and any other fields that you want to display to the user, but you don't want the user to be able to change. What you wind up with is that in the state of protected, these fields have gray text, and if it's displayed on a gray background where you're wanting to kind of indicate to the user that that is not an input-capable field, what you wind up with is gray on gray, and the user absolutely can't even read it. So it's really kind of ugly, and that's why a lot of people tend to use the Winwidget controllers is they don't have this issue of protected fields displaying in gray. The other issue that you have with MFC controls is that anytime you have a field on your user interface which is implemented as a checkbox, then the default of that is checked, whereas with the Winwidget, the default is unchecked, which is really how it should be. So in order to work around this, you've got to go into your code, your insert functions, and add code to default the option to no, so unchecked. And of course, what is wrong with both Winwidget and MFC? And the big one is they simply look outdated. They're very plain Jane. Sorry if I have any Janes out there in the audience. And the other one that we haven't looked at yet, but I just want to talk about briefly is that if you're using the frame patterns in Plex, frame properties and this type of thing, then what happens is that the active tab on the user interface, it displays in gray just like all of the other tabs. The only difference really is that it doesn't have like an underline underneath the tab, and its border is just slightly darker than the others. But if you have a lot of tabs on your user interface, it can be very difficult for the user to really be able to differentiate the active tab versus the rest of the tabs. So that's kind of the big one with Winwidget and MFC. So what's wrong with the Windows controls? And the answer to that is that there are some issues that you will need to work around in order to achieve the result that you desire. But because of its Plex and because it's patterns and because you already have a standards layer, you have a place where you can embed some code and make some changes to properties that are implemented throughout your application. So if you have a standards layer, it's very easy to just add the necessary source code, change the properties as needed in order to deliver the result that you desire. So once you've done this, once you've gone in and kind of tweaked your standards layer and added the source code, specified your linker settings, then your gen and build, the result is that your applications are going to look fresh and modern like they never have before. So let's look at the different controls and kind of compare in a side-by-side manner what the controls look like when you implement your application as Winwidget, MFC, and Windows controls. So we'll start with the Tabstrip controls. So if you're using the frame patterns, then you've got these applications that have these nice tabs on them. So the illustration at the top there is a Tabstrip control, and the active tab there is the second tab, which is the Widgets Edit dialog. When you look at that, it's very difficult to see which tab is the active tab. They really look almost identical. If you look real hard, you can differentiate that. Now let's compare that to the illustration at the bottom, which is that exact same user interface, which has been gen and built with the linker setting in there for the Windows controls. So now what you have is on your tabs there, the active tab changes to a white background. All the other tabs remain as a gray background. So for the user, it's immediately obvious which tab is the active tab. It just looks better. It looks crisper. It's much more user-friendly. Now let's do a side-by-side comparison of buttons on Winwidget, MFC, which really kind of look and feel the same, so I've kind of combined them. And then let's look at those same buttons running on a Windows 7 PC and those same buttons running on a Windows 10 PC. So on the left is the Winwidget MFC, and you're very familiar with those buttons because that's what you have on your user interfaces right now. So I've got some samples of the buttons. You know, I got one with bold, one that's protected, one that's got multi-line, one with graphic and a text, and one with just a graphic. Now, if you look at the middle column there, which is the Windows 7 control, you can see that the buttons, as I mentioned, they have kind of two different shades of gray. Now, 50 shades of gray, they have two shades of gray, a light gray on the top and a darker gray on the bottom. It gives the button some depth. The default button, you can see it has a blue border, so it immediately jumps out from you. The user knows which button is the default button. So if they just press enter, they know which button they're activating there. Over on the right, we can see the same application running on Windows 10. So what's interesting with Windows 10 is they kind of reverted back to square. They like sharp corners, and that's, if you look at any application running on Windows 10, you will notice that that's the way the buttons look. They're square. They do have that nice blue border around the default button and this type of thing. But I personally prefer the Windows 7 representation of the buttons. I think that they look much, much nicer. You will also notice on the Windows 10 buttons that there's only one shade of gray, so it kind of lacks the depth. I mean, it's really just kind of simplified. And in fact, it kind of looks and feels more like the Winwidget and MFC buttons, but it does add, you know, when you hover your mouse over the button, you know, it changes to a light blue background and stuff like that. So it's kind of a combination of the MFC and the Windows 7 buttons. Okay, so one interesting thing that we ran across as we migrated our applications over to the Windows controls is that we would notice that most of the buttons would be just fine. They would be native controls, but some buttons would revert to the Winwidget or MFC control, and we couldn't quite figure out. And we finally realized that it's the text color. If you use a color, anything other than black for the text on the button, no matter what you do, when you run the application, that button will use the Winwidget or MFC control. It will not pick up the native control. So the solution to that is, of course, to just go through and make sure that all of your buttons have a text property of black. So you can see that one on the bottom, it's not like the others there, and because of the fact that it has a text color of blue, you can see that it's picking up the MFC button. So you want consistency within your applications. You don't want some buttons to be the nice Windows buttons, you know, rounded with the 2 shades of gray, et cetera, and then some buttons to be that nasty old square button. So my suggestion is just make sure that you use black for the text color throughout your applications. If your buttons include a bitmap graphic, you will need to use source code in your application in order to have your application implement the native Windows control for that button. Otherwise, it will be like that situation with the blue on the button. No matter what, if you don't execute some source code for each button on your panel, what you'll wind up with is it will just revert to the Winwidget or MFC, whichever you're set to. So this is easy to do. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go into your standards layer and you're going to add a couple of subroutines. And each subroutine is going to execute some source code depending on whether or not your button has a graphic and text or just a graphic. Now, if your button does not contain a graphic and it's just text only, you do not need to execute any source code in order to implement that button as a native Windows button. So basically, you're going to add source code to your standards model, and you want to add it in such a way that it is inherited through into every client function that you have. You're going to need to go in and give each button a unique control name. So you want to start with your standards layer. Any buttons that is in your standards layer, that's where you're going to go in. You're going to give those buttons a control name, and you're going to execute the source code, for those controls. And then in your applications, then you're going to, so in your application, you've added 5 more buttons. You just go into those 5 buttons, give them a unique control name, and then in the action diagram, you're going to send it into the appropriate subroutine based on whether or not the button has a graphic only or a graphic and text. So it's pretty easy to do. This part does take a little bit more effort and time, but it's well worth it in the end. So here's just a little bit more detail on how to go about dealing with your buttons that have a bitmap. So what we've done here is we went in and we created a field. We call it ES_control, ES for Eagleson Systems, and your field will inherit from the control in the fields class library. And then what we do is we just go through and we give them names. So we've gone through and identified, all the different types of buttons that we have. There's detail add button, detail select button, details cancel, et cetera, and this is a very long list, and you'll just kind of keep adding to it as you need to. And for each of those fields, the literal value is the same thing as the name value. One thing that you can do might make your development easier is instead of trying to give these fields meaningful names, which of course the user doesn't see, this is really just kind of, at the development level, you could go in and you could just say, I want create button 1, button 2, button 3, down to button 100, just generic names. And that might help you at development time so that no matter what, you never have a situation where you need to add a new value for a button. Just, this button is button 44. Give it the appropriate name, execute button 44 source code in your application, and be done with it. So it's up to you. So here again is at the panel designer. So this particular button has a add bitmap, and so I give that control a name of grid add button, because that is the add button above the grid. You might also have one down in the detail region that might be called detail add button. But whatever you pick, you'll just want to make sure that whatever name you give it here, you're going to use that name in the action diagram that we're going to see next here. So basically, in my action diagram, and this is coded at the standards layer, so I always have this. So basically, within the local variable, I've got a variable I've created called button L for local, and it contains a field of the ES control. And that ES control field has the values for every value I've ever used for a button. So then what you do is at the end of initialization, you're going to execute a subroutine. In my case, it was called XP buttons with a graphic. Within that subroutine, just below it there, is where it goes in and it does a check of a meta variable and says, is this WinC? Because everything you're doing here really only applies to the C++ client. So if we're generating for WinC, then we want to execute a subroutine for each of them controls. So what I do is I just set the ES control field equal to a value of grid refresh button, and then execute the subroutine of XP button graphic only. So basically, you're going to execute the appropriate subroutine for each button on your panel. But this code happens very, very fast, absolutely no negative impact on the performance of your application. So let's look at a side-by-side comparison of the various types of controls on a panel. So basically what I've done is taken this little prototype and gen built it as run it with Winwidget controls, gen build it, run it with MFC controls, gen build it, run it with the Windows controls. In this case, we're looking at Windows 7 here, and you can see a side-by-side comparison of them. Slight variances for all the controls. They look similar, but each of them kind of has a different uniqueness to it. The one that's probably the most unique is the drop-down combo box. So it's the third control down there. It looks and feels quite a bit different than the Winwidget or MFC control, and we'll see some more examples of that here in just a little bit. Okay, I talked earlier about the issue of the MFC control and how nasty that control looks on your user interfaces when the state is disabled. So when it's protected, so whenever a field is on your user interface and it's protected, and it's being protected automatically into patterns for things like keys, and you'll have other fields that you've gone in and you do a set state of protected on. What you wind up with at runtime is that top left graphic there, where you wind up with fields that have gray text on a gray background. The value that's in the field is also gray. Now, if you've also gone in and said, okay, I don't want read-only fields to have a white background, because to a user, a white background indicates that that's a field that they can type into. You may have gone in and changed the background color of the edit control to something like gray. Then what you wind up with is gray text on a gray background, and that's harder to see than a white rabbit in a snowstorm. It's invisible. You can't see it. So what I'm going to show you here is how a better solution to that is to go in your standards layer, and for state protected, get rid of that disabled. It's already read-only. A user can't change it. There really is no practical reason why it needs to be disabled. So I've shown you 3 places there where in state protected, I've gone in and I've gotten rid of by default, it's disabled, yes, and I've changed it to disabled, no. And what that allows me to do is, like in the graphic on the left in the middle there, that's a better rendering of what those fields will look like when they're read-only but not disabled. So it's much better for your users. They can still read the field, and it just looks and feels much better. So that's the solution that I would recommend for fields that are in the protected state. Okay, so in your applications, you may or may not have gone in to your standards layer and manipulated the background color of the field when that field is in state error. So what happens is the user, they're running your application, and they hit enter, and they've got 4 fields that are in error, so they get messages, and then they need to find which fields are actually in error. So what you've probably done is you've gone in and you said, okay, in the state error, I want the color of that field to be whatever. In this case, it's red. You may use yellow. Who knows? But the point is if you use any color for the edit control, then you're going to immediately run into kind of an anomaly here where the drop-down combo boxes, they do not change color when the state is error. So what you're seeing here on the illustration on the top left is every one of those fields on that user interface is in state error. However, when you look at the drop-down combo box for the status, it looks and feels exactly like it did when it was in the default state. Now, what's interesting is that if you were to drop down that field, then if you look over on the right in the middle there, you'll see that the actual list of values has a background color like the rest of them, but you don't see that until you drop down the list of values. So what happens is that any fields that you have on your user interface that are a drop-down combo box, if they're in state error, they appear that they're in state default. They do not appear that that field is in error. So what we have done to solve this problem is in our standards layer, we change so that we never manipulate the background color of the edit control when a field is in error. What we do is we manipulate the color of the text of the label when the field is in error. So on the illustration on the bottom left there, every one of those fields is in error, and I know that because of the fact that the label, that the text color of the label is changed to red. So that really kind of gives us the result that we want, and that is we're able to differentiate fields that are in default state versus in state error. The user can see that the field is red. They know that that field is in error and that they need to fix it. So to us, that was a very simple solution to a simple problem, and I actually like it much better than lighten up the background color of the edit control with a different color. Another issue that you'll need to work around when you use the Windows controls, and that is that there's issue with a lack of focus. And the issue with the lack of focus is such that for combo boxes, check boxes, and radio button controls, when that control gains focus, it looks exactly like it did before the field gained focus. There's nothing that changes with regard to the appearance of the control when the control gains focus. So for example, on the top left, we've got the Winwidget and MFC control. They both have the same behavior in terms of on the control on the top there is the field before it gains focus. When that field gains focus, when the user tabs to that field, then the background color of that field changes to blue, so it's obvious to the user which field has focus, and it makes it very user-friendly for the user. Now let's compare that to when you run the application with your controls generated as Windows 7. So over on the top right, we've got that same field, which is status, and the one on top is where the field does not have focus. The one directly below that is where that exact same field does have focus. So I tab to that field, and what I notice is that nothing changes. There isn't anything that allows me to look at my user interface and see that that field now has focus, because the field looks and feels exactly like it did before it gained focus. So it's a nasty problem. It will confuse the heck out of your users, and you don't want to implement that. Now, what's interesting about this is that if the user presses on that user interface, regardless of which field has focus, if the user presses the Alt key one time, then all of a sudden that sets a flag on for that user interface that says the user wants to see fields with like a line around them, whatever, to indicate that that field has focus. So by pressing the Alt key, then that allows that field to behave like it should, and that is when the field gains focus, you can tell. In this, it puts a little line around the control. The issue is that you don't want your users to have to press Alt every time as they're using your application, at the panel level. So a screen comes up, okay, I'm going to press Alt so that I'm going to be able to identify, when these fields gain control. Users are simply not going to do it. So to deal with this issue of the focus or lack of focus on Windows controls, you have a couple of options. One is to just live with it, and that's a bad option. That's something that it'll just frustrate your users. That's an option they'll probably take, and then they'll just test your Plex applications for years and years. There's a second option available to you, and that is at the PC level, you can go into your Windows settings, and there's an option on there to make the keyboard easier to use, and then you check this box that says underline keyboard shortcuts and access keys. So when you go in on your PC and you check that option, then your Plex applications will automatically indicate to the user when these fields have focus. The problem is that this setting has to be done at the user level, down at the deployed PC level. And you would have to go in on everyone's PC and you would have to turn that on. And the reality is that your users may not want that turned on. They may not want it, for other applications, because that's global to the PC. They may not want that. So there's a better solution, and that's the way we've implemented that, and that is that in our standards layer, down in the UI basic shell at the very lowest level, we simply execute a subroutine called send alt escape. And I'll show you the source code later in this presentation, but what that does is the first thing that your function does is it sends two keystrokes, an alt and then escape. The escape cancels the alt. And what that does is that when the user is running the application there, these fields, the drop-down combo boxes, check boxes, and radio controls, when the user taps to them controls, they light up with the little dots around them, and it's obvious to the user that that field has focus. So this is a way that we've implemented it. So it's in our standards layer, it's automatic. We don't have to change any Windows settings. The user doesn't have to initiate anything by keying, hitting the Alt key. So here is kind of a side-by-side illustration of a native Windows 10 panel, that, as well as a Plex panel generated and running MSC controls, and the same panel running Windows 7 controls. And you'll see that on the right, the Windows controls, in this case, it's running on Windows 10. It matches the user interfaces from native Windows. The buttons are the same, the edit controls are the same, drop-down combo boxes, they're exactly the same as what the users have with modern Windows applications. So to implement this step by step, there's two ways you can do it. There's the quick and dirty way, which is the way you're going to start out with, and that is you're simply going to go out to the wiki. You're going to grab the linker settings that George Jeffcock has published. You're going to copy that. You're going to paste it into your linker setting on your gen-build option, and you're going to create your exe. You don't need to regen and build anything other than create the exe and run your application, and you're immediately going to see your application running with the Windows native controls. Now, you're also going to have, some of the issues that we talked about earlier there that you're going to implement, but to just immediately see how this is going to look and feel, that's how you can do it. And I would recommend that you do it to just kind of see what your application is going to look and feel like. But the better solution, the correct solution, the long-term solution is add your linker settings, go into your standards, start with your standards layer, go in on all your buttons, give those buttons nice, meaningful control names, add the source code in your standards layer that you're going to execute for each of those buttons to deal with graphics for any buttons that have graphics. If you don't have graphics on your buttons, there's nothing you need to do. But of course, in patterns, we've got graphics on our buttons, and you've probably added a lot more graphics on the buttons that in your applications. You're probably going to want to deal with the issue of the Alt key, and I would recommend adding source code into your standards layer to deal with that as well. Create your exe and run it. So it's going to be kind of an iterative process because you're going to want to go through and go through all of your applications, go through every screen, look at where you've got to go in and fix something, but it's worth it. It's a minimal upfront investment for a tremendous reward on the back end. Okay, so as I mentioned, everything that we looked at today was really pioneered by George Jeffcock. He's the one who went out and published all this information out on the wiki page, Plex, and there's the address. And he's got screenshots that show some of the applications that he's developed. The user interfaces, they are tremendous. They're by far greater than anything I've shown you. Mine was quick and dirty, but he's shown you some actual stuff where he's really created some world-class modern user interfaces using these Windows controls. I would encourage you to go out to the wiki and read all about it. You can copy and paste the source code that you need directly from that website and move forward to get this implemented into your applications. So there is the two different flavors of source code. It's really the same source code that he's got published out there on the wiki that's just kind of showing that same source code in my Plex model there. So basically the top one there is the source code you need for a button that has with a graphic, and so it's got text and a graphic, and the one below it is a button with a graphic only. It's different source code, so you just execute the same one. Each of the source code members, you'll notice, has one input parameter, which is the control name. So basically you just populate that control name with the value that you've used as the control name on your panel, send it through the source code, and that enables that button to be rendered as a Windows button at runtime. I talked a little bit about how we added source code into our model to deal with the Alt key, so that the user, we don't want the user to have to press the Alt key in order to be able to differentiate when these controls have focus. And so our simple solution to that is up in our UI basic shell function, so it's the lowest level user interface function. At the end of initialization there, we send it into a subroutine called send alt escape. And there's the source code for that. In our case, we use VB script. You can certainly use C++. There's a lot of it out there if you want to just Google it. And it's totally up to you. The VB script works great. And basically what it does is it sends two keystrokes in sequence. It sends the Alt key and it sends the escape key. The escape key basically cancels the Alt key so that the user, if it just did the Alt key and then the user types in like S, if you had an Alt S shortcut, then the user is just executed. So basically it's a cancellation of the Alt key. And there's the source code at the bottom of your functions there. And of course, it tests to see whether or not the function is a WinC function, because this only applies to C++ applications. And there it is. Okay, so now let's take it out for a short test drive here. This is a two-seater, so I only have room for myself and one other participant. So anyway, the rest of you can just kind of jump in the back or whatever. There's not a lot of room in this thing. So let's take and run. Hopefully everyone will still be able to see my screen here.
Hey, Roger.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. As of right now, you're not sharing your screen. You need to go up to the menu at the top and do Share My Screen.
Okay, so let's get back. I'm looking for the Share My Screen.
At the very top, next to the File and Edit.
Oh,
the main menu.
Oh, there we go. It was hidden below another dialog box I had. Okay, so Share My Screen. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it now. Great.
All right. So this first little prototype application is just a simple user interface. It's got a grid on it. It's got a detail region. Here you can see the different types of controls. Down here, the focus is on the description. When I tab to the status, you'll notice that it automatically changes the appearance of that control. That's because it executed that source code to send the Alt Escape. When I tab to the checkbox control, you can see that it visually changes its appearance. And when I tab over to the radio buttons, then they change appearance accordingly. You can see the buttons. When I hover my mouse over a button, it changes the background of that button from gray to blue, so it has a nice look and feel to it. Same thing up here. The only difference is the size of the buttons. So pretty simple. Let's run another little prototype here to look at just some out-of-the-box Plex functions and how they look when they have been generated with the Windows linker option here. So in this case here, you'll notice that I've got the Tabstrip control. When I click on the tab, you'll notice that the background color of that tab changes to white. It's much easier for the user to differentiate the active tab versus the other tabs. So now let's go and let's just run some basic out-of-the-box functions here. So this in here is a edit dialog pattern out of the box. So that one there, now I said it's out of the box, so I'm not inheriting from anything in a standards where I've accommodated for the Alt key. So you'll notice, let me back up a little bit here. So my focus is currently on the second field, which is the widget description. When I tab to the next field, which is the status, all of a sudden it's like, where did my cursor go? I have no way of knowing. So now if I press Alt, I press Alt one time, now all of a sudden I've changed the behavior of this thing. So when those fields gain focus, then they show. So that's kind of out of the box what your a traditional Plex panel might look and feel like with the Windows controls. Here's our friend, the edit detail, same thing. Okay. Look at the buttons. So here's the various variations of buttons, and you'll see our friend down there at the bottom, which has the blue text. And so instead of it being rendered as the native Windows button, it's rendered as the nasty old MFC button. So it's square. It doesn't change color as the user highlights over it, et cetera, et cetera. This particular user interface, I'm just going to show you some different variations when we're controlling the state of button. So here is the user interface in state default. If I go to state protected, this is just out of the box what happens when a field is protected and you wind up with that gray on gray, very ugly. If I click this next button, which I'm going to set it to protected, but I've gone in and said disabled no. So basically what we see now with this particular variation of the state protected is that we got rid of that disabled property and we just said no. We just want it to be read-only. We don't want that gray on gray. This next button here is state error. So every field on this user interface is in state error, but you'll notice that this field, you don't know that until you click on it and drop down the values. So let's look at another variation of state error, and that is where we manipulate the color of the label. So every one of these fields is in state error. I can tell that by looking at it, and I don't have the issue of dealing with drop-down combo boxes that are in state error. Okay. So let's get back to the presentation here. Okay, so you are sharing your screen. How do I get back and see the PowerPoint presentation here?
All you need to do is you can either stop sharing or you can click on
stop sharing.
Yeah. So let's see. Actually, I'm not sure what the best way to stop sharing is. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off. So I'm no longer sharing, but I want to see the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, stop sharing. We're back. There it goes. Okay, so we returned the Ferrari back to the pits, and everyone climb out. And now we are ready for your questions and hopefully my answers. Good. We don't have any questions, so yeah, just a reminder, everybody, please ask your questions via the Q&A box. So we'll give you a couple minutes to type if you need to type. So far, there aren't any questions, just a couple comments from George, and I see a good job, Roger, from Rich. So, so far, just some positive feedback. Great. I would encourage everyone at this time, right now, go out to the wiki and look at the article that George Jeffcock has published. He did a tremendous job in showing you how to implement this. And I think that as you go in and spend some time with this, you will see that this is one of the greatest things that you can do to add value to your existing Plex applications. It's something that I think that once you kind of spent a little bit of time with it and become comfortable with it, you will see that you can add so much value to your applications and really just give your applications an immediate boost at no charge. This is one of the few things that we've been able to do since Obsidian 1.0 where for absolutely no cost you can go in and add this much value to your Plex applications. And that is all I have for today. I understand that this webcast will be available for you to download, and I would encourage you to do that and go through and look at some of the slides in more detail if you want. The source code, everything you need, it's most of it is on these slides, and anything else you need is out on the wiki that George has published. So hopefully everything that you need to implement this is available to you. Hey, Roger, before you jump off, there actually are a few questions that have come in. Okay. I don't know if you can see them. From Mark, from Jill, from Marcus. Are you able to see them or no? Okay, so I'm going to read through them here. Does the grid automatically have the blue and white? It does not automatically have the blue and white, but you can certainly add just a little bit of code to your application in order to basically turn that feature on. So basically all I did is I went in, you probably want to do this at your standards layer,
and say that in the state highlighted, the background color of the grid is that soft blue, and then in default it's white, and then basically as you're appending to the grid, then you're basically, you know, doing an odd even thing. So the first time you say set state default before you do the append, and then you toggle it, and then you say the next time I append, I want it to be state highlighted and back and forth, and that's just a quick and dirty way to get that kind of blue and white alternating color background into your grids. You can do that you can do it in OBase, you can do it in patterns. It's just something that you just add a little bit of code to, and I would encourage people to do it because it modernizes your grids. I mean, I think it really gives them a fresh new look and feel with just a minimal amount of code. The other thing I want to mention is everything that I've just shown you, it doesn't apply to just patterns. Everything I just showed you also applies to OBase. There's a lot of people doing OBase. We have OBase as well, and everything I've just shown you works just as well in OBase as it does in patterns. Okay. So there's another question. If you're using Windows 10, do you have an option of using the Windows 7 controls? And I'm not aware of any way that you can specify which flavor of controls you're using at runtime. I think you're either using Windows native or you're using Winwidget MFC. So if you're using Windows native, then your controls, they're going to look and feel like all of the controls on any other native Windows applications. You know, for the Windows 10, your buttons are going to look like a Windows 10 button. Your drop-down combo boxes are going to look like a Windows 10, which is probably what you want. So it may be possible. I'm just not aware of how to do it. My guess is George Jeffcock, if it can be done, George Jeffcock will either figure it out or he's already done it. I'm not really sure. Like I say, he's really the technical master of everything I've just shown you here. So we have a question here about what about OBase, and like I say, it works wonderfully in OBase. We have a tremendous amount of OBase code as well, and everything I've just shown you has been implemented in OBase. It has been implemented in patterns, and it is seamless, and it looks and feels and works exactly the same. So yes, it is OBase compatible. And then there is a comment here that says, see Stella Tools, Abstract, and UI Basic button, Microsoft. So definitely go out and check out anything and everything that George Jeffcock has published, because he is a master of all this stuff. He really is a wizard. There's a lot of information that he has that is not in this presentation that you will be able to benefit from. So is it possible to have transparent graphics for the buttons? And I will say no. And I have tried to go in and do that. And the problem is that when you go in on the control and you pick a graphic that is not a bitmap, and it's not, 256 color bitmap is the highest resolution that you can go, and those don't support the transparent graphic of the button. So I believe the answer to that is no, you cannot have transparent graphics on the buttons. There's some comments. They are not questions.
I think that's all of them.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on. Yeah, there is one more. The one you started to read from Diane.
Okay, it says, do you know if Certify has an issue learning the different control types? That's from Diane Hunt. I don't know. I don't know. I think that what you'll need to do is you'll need to take everything I've shown you, go back to your models and implement it and take it out for a test drive and see what you get. I think that's the best way to really kind of see where you're at. And, it could be that your applications are going to look and feel wonderful with some minimal issues other than, the graphics that you're going to have to deal with, and you're not going to have a lot of work in front of you. You may have more work depending on, the look and feel of your applications now and what you've done and this type of thing. If you have a lot of color on your buttons, for example, you got some work in front of you to get rid of that color and that type of thing. So, and it could be that if you haven't added a lot of graphics to your buttons, then this is seamless to you. You know, gen and build, you've got it. You will have to deal with the graphics that you know, Plex in the patterns where it's implemented graphics and buttons, but it's just going to vary by customer. So I just encourage you to plug it in and take it out for a test drive and see what you get. It says, I think we're all using some of the original bitmaps with Obsidian. Crazy as that may seem, do you have any suggestions for good graphic resources that match the bitmap scales from Plex and toolbars, et cetera, et cetera? That's a great question, and I think one of the first things that anyone out there using Plex will want to do is stop using those 15-year-old graphics. If you want to give your applications a new look and feel, the first place to start with is getting rid of 15-year-old graphics. So, you know, the internet is a great place to go out there and you know, search and find stuff. And a lot of stuff, if you can find something that's a good quality graphic, you know, what I typically do is I'll just go out and get the graphic I want. I don't care what format it's in. Pull it up in Paint, save it as 256 color bitmap format, start resizing it, hit the little resize button, and then, you know, start off with, say, okay, it's twice as big as I need, so I want it, you know, 50%. It shrinks it down 50%. And you kind of keep doing that until you get it 21 by 21. And when it's 21 by 21, 256 colors, you got it. And a lot of graphics, once you start compressing it down to that, then you can't tell what the graphic is, so then you delete it and you start over. But I mean, that's a good technique to just go out there and, you know, grab a graphic that's already fairly small and, you know, start reducing its size and this type of thing, and just play with it a little bit, but definitely replace those old crappy graphics. They may have done the job, you know, 15 years ago, but in 2016, they're obsolete, they're antiquated, they just look old. Get rid of them. Okay, any other questions?
I think that's it, Roger. So we're
okay.
Past the top of the hour, so I think we should wrap up.
Okay.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. Thanks very much, Roger. I really appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day, you guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.